Hey everybody, this is TCG Productions here, and today is January 9th, 2024, and the time has just rolled 2 p.m. And today, what I am going to be doing here is doing an unboxing, a little bit of an overview, and possibly a partial demonstration of a computer that I have been on the lookout for quite some time. Yes, there is a backstory here, and y'all are about to hear it. So, what you see here is a box containing what should be the computer in question. If the box is heavy, just going by the weight of the box, it probably more than likely contains the computer in question. Now, hopefully UPS didn't. Now, hopefully the computer inside is still okay, but I think it is because it doesn't look like UPS played a game of regulation football with this box. The last few things that I've had shipped through UPS did look like they had a game of regulation football played with them, including, unfortunately, this monitor right here, an Acros View 33 barely Super VGA monitor, because right there in the corner there is a crack in the case of the monitor, which also happens to correspond with a sizable hole that had been punched through the box that shipped that monitor. So yeah, something pointy probably got rammed into that box in a distribution center at more than a little bit of speed, because there was quite adequate packing inside the box, but still it managed to go through the decently thick cardboard on the box and through the bubble wrapping and whatnot that protected the monitor in the box, and it still managed to crack the casing of the monitor there. So yeah, anyways, digression. This computer here, this is not the exact system. It's not even the exact model of the system that I'm about to be talking about, but it's as close as I'm going to get for a not absolutely wild, out of this world sum of money. So, let me see, I'm going to be going back about 20 years here. My mom bought a Gateway personal computer system. Yeah, mom or dad, one of the two. They bought a Gateway personal computer system sometime between 2002 and 2004, if I had to say. And that computer system was used up until 2012. Now that particular computer system was a Gateway system extremely similar to the one that's in this box. And yes, I mean just plain Gateway, not Gateway 2000. Though you might hear me call them that at least once in this video, so don't be surprised. And basically that computer was extremely high-end. It had a hyper-threaded Pentium 4 processor in it, probably socket 478 if I had to guess. I don't believe it was a socket 423, because I think socket 423 was too early in the Pentium 4 era for hyper-threading to really be a thing. Because Intel still had a lot of work to do on the Pentium 4 processor back in the socket 423 era, because in my opinion the socket 423 Pentium 4s were just plain lethargic, and a decently spec'd Pentium 3 system could outpace it, especially the Dell Precision 220 system, which I have sitting underneath the table here, which is actually sporting a pair of 733 MHz Coppermine Pentium 3s, 256 kilobytes of integrated cache. So yeah, probably a socket 478 Pentium 4 here. I believe it had a 250 watt power supply of some or another description. I cannot remember if it was the infamous Bestech ATX 250 12E supply, but given how the system went down hard on a power outage around May or June of 2012, and it never came up again, and was actually later diagnosed with a bad motherboard, I do suspect that it actually did have a Bestech ATX 250 12E supply, and that power supply expired. Specifically, what likes to happen with those power supplies is it uses a 2 transistor design for the 5 volt standby circuit, and there is a critical support capacitor in that 2-transistor circuit that fails. And whenever that capacitor fails, the 5-volt standby voltage goes absolutely through the moon and beyond. I've seen people record 10, 15, 20 volts on that rail when that capacitor goes. And of course, whenever the voltage goes that high, it's directly connected to the motherboard, powers the system south. It powers the system south bridge, various parts of the chipset, any portions, any USB hardware or PS2 hardware that's configured to be always hot is also powered up, and it just absolutely smokes everything in its path between it and ground. So yeah, it's easy to see why a 5-volt standby overvoltage would absolutely kill the system dead, especially the motherboard and every single computing peripheral that would be attached to the system whenever that happens. Now, I don't know if this was a direct cause of that, the keyboard and mouse being fried whenever that happened, or if this was just incompetency on the part of the computer shop that built the replacement system. But the replacement system, whenever we first got the replacement system, and this is actually tying back into the beginning of the 7 years of my computer history video, going back through 7, which is now more than 10 years of main computer setup history. You'll know the replacement computer to the early 2000s gateway system, the keyboard and mouse did not work at all. I can't remember if we just had to replace the keyboard and mouse on that system, or if they started working after way too much poking and prodding around in various hardware-related portions of Windows XP. So, I can't remember if we had to replace the keyboard and mouse or not, because it has been 13 and a half no, it's been 11 and a half years since that's happened. So we're talking middle of, well, let me see, actually, yeah, we're talking at least 11 years since that's happened. So anyways, but it had a hyper-threaded Pentium 4 processor. I'm not completely sure on the power supply very well. Could have been a Bestech ATX-250-12E. I believe it had 512 megabytes, either that or a gigabyte of DDR SD RAM. Wasn't RAM bus. And then it had an 80 gigabyte Western Digital Caviar hard drive, and it also had ATI Radeon. It had an ATI Radeon GPU in it. I cannot remember if it was AGP or PCI. I would like to say PCI, but I can't possibly be sure of that. It had an IDE optical drive of some description. So that's what I remember. And it always ran Windows XP. It was COA'd for Windows XP Home Edition. And speaking of Windows XP and operating systems and hard disks and whatnot, I don't know if this thing, I have no idea if this system has been wiped. The person who sent it to me intended for the system to be wiped, and they are not sure if they have wiped it or not. So once we get this thing out of the box and plugged in and whatnot, I'll fire it up, and if the system has not been wiped, then we are going to go ahead and clear the drive immediately on camera. Just so that way everyone's sure, yes, the disk has actually been wiped. So anyways, but this particular system has been, that particular system, the one I'm talking about that died in 2012 with the bad motherboard, that was really the start of my tinkering around with computers, because after I got a hold of that thing, I've been learning about computers a little bit prior to that point, and I took a bit of an off-the-cuff guess of a bad motherboard, and yeah, sure enough, bad motherboard. Because the system wouldn't power up, wouldn't respond to the power button, wouldn't respond to the reset button. It could very well have been a faulty power supply, but I'm not very sure. As I have said previously, it could have been a chain reaction. critical capacitor goes in the 5-volt standby circuit, power goes out, power comes back on, 5-volt standby rail shoots to the moon, kills the motherboard, kills the keyboard and mouse. And the end result is a completely dead system. So, anyways, but I mean, once I got a hold of that system, I tore that thing down, put it back together about 87 million thousand times. And it wasn't too long after that that I really started getting into messing around with computers, and really my first computer project, other than dealing with my main computer as my first main computer as of like December 25th, 2013 at 6:45 in the morning, with that really horrendous Gigabyte G41MT-S2PT motherboard that was really crash prone, especially with regards to its built-in video hardware. You'd look at it funny, and you'd look at it funny from across the house while yelling at a dog, and the system would either lock up or it would crash. And more than 90% of the time when that computer crashed, not the gateway, the system that replaced the gateway, more than 90% of the time when that particular computer crashed, Windows would say that an attempt to reset the video adapter failed. It's like the video adapter stopped responding and attempts to reset it failed. And that would be the end of that system's uptime. And it would also, and every now and again, Windows itself, the screen would freeze and it would black out and come back. And sometimes the monitor would even lose signal or sync. And whenever it would come back, there would usually be a message on the taskbar that says video adapter reset successfully, or video adapter stopped responding. But the content of the little pop-up bubble on the taskbar would be the video adapter stopped responding and was successfully reset. And I think it mentioned something about troubleshooting or checking for updated drivers or something of that nature. But yeah, and then of course not long, of course that was, I think, yeah, of course before I even got to take this system apart, we were trying to get Windows 7 onto the replacement system, you know, the one with the Gigabyte motherboard that was already flaky to begin with, and it was a 64-bit copy of Windows 7. And of course it was running a 32-bit copy of Windows XP, and so you could just upgrade install, and Windows was complaining about that. And I said that you have to go into the BIOS, go into the boot menu. You have to go into the BIOS, go to the boot options, and put the optical drive at the very top of the boot order, and then do a clean reinstallation. Either that or access the boot menu, manually select the optical drive, and then do a clean reinstallation of Windows. Long story short, the system got. Long story short, of course, this was really early on in my messing around with computers, and so of course my parents were trying to do this, and they had a hunch that I was correct, but they weren't completely sure, so they wanted to take it to a computer repair shop and have them do it, which they did. And whenever we went back to go pick the system up from the computer repair shop, I asked them, let me guess, you had to go into the BIOS, you had to go put the DVD drive at the top of the boot order, and then boot up off of that, didn't do a clean reinstallation of Windows. And they said, yep, exactly. So, but we had a few more instances with the computer repair shop before we finally wrote off taking our computers to repair shops for good. And that was after a Panda antivirus update had went completely sideways, trashed the system out, and my mom's computer unfortunately got the worst of it. And basically, they had to do they claimed that the motherboard was bad, and then the replacement motherboard wouldn't fit in the case, and then they had to get a new processor, a new RAM. They basically ended up building a replacement system. And then they claimed that the hard drive was locked and they couldn't do anything with it. So I called them and asked for the RAM and the hard drive back. And they were like, okay. And so once we got the system back, and it had been up there, I think a month. It had been up at the shop for like a month or two, and it had been horribly misdiagnosed. Whenever we got home from that computer shop, I plugged the hard drive in to my main computer at the time, and I kid you not, inside of 5 minutes, I had the hard drive. Inside of 5 minutes, I had the hard drive usable again, because all I had to do was just blow away the existing partition table and steamroll something else down on top of it. And after that, we had completely written off taking our computers to a computer repair shop. So, but yeah, that is it's amazing how one computer can spiral out into all of that. And so, anyways, getting back on topic here, I have been looking for a system very similar to that particular gateway system for quite some time. I can't remember if it was from the Gateway Performance lineup or not. I know the Gateway Performance lineup is a thing because one of our neighbors has an older Gateway Performance system in their garage storeroom. And given how that the Gateway in question, one that died in 2012, had a hyper-threaded Pentium 4, 80GB hard drive, as well as, I think, 512 megabytes of memory, ATI Radeon, a dedicated ATI Radeon graphics of some sorts or another, and I can't remember if it had a dedicated sound card or not. I'm not sure. I don't think it did. I know it had a modem, and it was connected to the internet, I think, via Ethernet. At least for some of its life. It spent most of its life post 2009 or so here in the tech room, disconnected from the internet because the antivirus had long expired on it. And one day we reconnected that system to the internet for about 20 minutes, and in those 20 minutes, basically grabbing some food, going to the bathroom, and coming back, the system had accumulated about 200 pop-ups on the screen, and so it got disconnected from the internet, and it never saw an internet connection again. It died. It died after that. And of course, the two aren't directly cause and effect related, the point being, the system was never connected to the internet again after that particular run-in. So, anyways, I have spent 18 minutes and counting talking about this computer, one like it, and a few systems, and actually a few systems that came after it in its lineup, as well as some stuff that happened as a direct result. And so, yeah, I think it's time to go ahead, open this box, and pull this thing out. I hope that this thing isn't full of snowman poop, because that will make getting into it very irritating. But I mean, then again, it would definitely be on the irritating end of things. And I have just discovered that I do not need a knife to open this box up because the tape released. There we go, there's one side of the box open. Alright, it's been double taped. And we've got a bunch of styrofoam fragments all over the place, which is patently irritating, but people are free to fill their boxes with their packaging materials of choice. There's no law that says you do not have to use styrofoam in second-hand packaging. So the box is open, and there is the side of the computer exposed. now I have to figure out where to pull this where to put all this stuff. The styrofoam will be going away as soon as I'm done with this video because it has absolutely no right to stick around and create the mess that it does in this tank. Ugh. And there is an upgrade Sony optical drive in this system. This is COA for Windows XP Home Edition, and it is just as heavy as I remember the 2012 era system being. Yes, Gateway computer has a hyper-threaded Pentium 4 processor. No front firewire, just as I remember the other system being. It's got the tiny reset button and the big power button. There's a black floppy drive in it. And now, this piece of styrofoam goes in here. Now this box gets closed up and put out of the way somewhere, and I will worry about cleaning up all the styrofoam crap later. So this system has obviously the family pet used it as obviously somebody's family pet used the front panel of it as a bathroom at some point or another, which, while patently irritating, is not the end of the world. It is COA for Windows XP Home Edition. COA is in surprisingly good condition. It's missing the back system fan. Yeah, it is missing the back fan here. Just looking at it, it does not appear that it was ever installed, which is kind of curious. I don't immediately recognize who makes that power supply off the top of my head. We've got thumb screws here, which are also equipped with hex heads. That seems on par with the original system. I don't know if that power supply has been replaced or not. I don't remember, and I also don't immediately know who made it just by looking at the back of it. But looking on the back here, we've got 2 PS2 ports, 6 USB ports, serial parallel and VGA, and we've also got a network port. I have no idea whether that's gigabit or not. No idea whether that's gigabit or not. We have our standard line out, line in, and mic in ports. We've got our modem at the bottom here, and someone has added an additional 4 USB ports via a USB expansion card. Almost certainly PCI, and just looking at the color of those ports, USB 1.1 capability at best. But then again, it was kind of the Wild West for USB expansion in the 90s and 2000s, so those very well may be USB 2 ports, but whoever manufactured the card whoever was manufacturing the card didn't bother to get the properly colored ports, or the designer didn't spec the properly colored ports, and so they're just USB 2 ports disguised as USB 1.1 ports, which is a whole lot better than USB 1, which is a whole lot better as USB 1.1 ports disguised as USB 2 ports. So, yeah, the COA is in surprisingly good condition. Let's look at this. Let's look at this here. Gateway model number 510SH, manufactured November 24th, 2003. So, yep, this is definitely a Gateway 510 system. Clear off more styrofoam bits and pieces. All 4 feet on the bottom are in good shape. We've got our COA up here. Whoopee. It's actually in pretty good condition. And then we have our front panel here, which is honestly the worst looking part of the system so far, other than the side cover, which just has styrofoam crap all over it. So someone has added a Sony DVD someone has added a Sony DVD-ROM drive and CD burner. Just given how that's a beige bezel, it may have been a carryover from some other system. Of course, it also just could have been the first thing that qualified as a DVD-ROM and CD burner drive. And it appears to actually duplicate the capabilities of the factory installed drive. So, and then of course we have our smiling front panel right here. I've always loved the appearance of that front panel. In my opinion, it actually looks miles ahead of all the beige stuff that came before it. And as you may or may not have been able to see on the bottom there, it is equipped with a hyper-threaded Pentium 4 processor. I don't know if it's a Northwood or Prescott. It could be both, I think, just given the fact this is a 2003 era system. Of course, I could also be completely wrong about that. I'd like to think Northwood, but I'm not completely sure. And so now let's go ahead and open this system up for the first time on camera and see what lies within. Yeah, that's not a factory power supply, I can tell you that much. That is absolutely not a factory power supply. I remember this heatsink because I took the fan off of it and I used the fins to make music. Ooh, we do have an AGP port. We also have serial ATA ports too. And a very interestingly cased clock crystal. So, looking at that hard drive, I would say it's definitely an Ultra DMA. It's definitely an Ultra DMA drive of some sort or another, because we have an 80 conductor IDE cable and probably Ultra DMA 133, if I had to say. And then we have another 80 conductor cable for the optical drives. This is very cheap and nasty power supply wiring. I will probably be swapping something else in before we power this thing up. Manhattan, bringing computers to life, and then the typical hallmarks of a cheap and crappy Chinese power supply. So I'm not going to be powering this system up with that power supply in there. It's getting changed out because I have more than perfectly fine, competent replacement supplies with which to throw at this system. But given how this cable appears to be relatively undisturbed, no obvious pull marks in it or anything, and this drive may not have been wiped. So yeah, we will definitely proceed with caution as far as booting the system up goes. Given how this has an AGP 8-ax slot, I would almost certainly say that the original gateway system that died in 2012 had an AGP graphics card in it. And someone has taken the liberty of upgrading the RAM in this thing. Certainly not a bad idea. I have no idea what operating system is actually running on here. It could be anything. Given how the RAM has been upgraded, we're almost certainly... It could be Windows XP. I would be more inclined to say possibly Windows 7. Or I would be really, really annoyed if it was Windows Vista. Because Windows Vista does not run well unless you actually have a really high-performance mid-late 2000s computer, which this one is not. It is a high-performance early 2000s system at best. So just looking at this hard drive, we have yeah, that's a Western Digital drive, probably a 400 or an 800 BB series drive if I had to say. Then again, it could also be a high-performance, then again, it could also be a really nice high-performance Caviar drive. I know that the hard drive in the old gateway system was a Caviar. And the screw just fell down somewhere. Isn't that nice? Go ahead and release this latch here. And unseat this hard drive. Well, I called that one. It's a WD-800. I think the Western Digital Proteus drives had this silver color on it, as well as a BB suffix on them. So yeah, I called that one WD-800. How can I tell? Well, it's got the older style PCB on here, and it's also got, and I'm also looking at this back casing. So this would have been a high capacity. This would have been a high capacity drive for about 2003 or so. Most people were still kicking along with 20 and 40 gigabyte drives pretty well. There were a few holdouts from the Windows era that were still, from the Windows 9X era, that were still getting along on 4 and 8 gigabyte drives. But about by the time you got to Windows 2000 is whenever 20 gigabyte drives really started to become popular. Because Windows 2000 plus a whole bunch of programs plus a whole bunch of data, well, let's just put it this way, it would fill an 8 gigabyte drive really quick, and 10 and 15 gigabyte drives were just really oddball in the early 2000s. So most people jumped to a 20 gig or even a 40 gig drive, and if you were really highfalutin, you'd get like an 80 or 160 gig drive. So I'll just go ahead and looking at this, the drive does not appear to have been removed. So yeah, chances are this hasn't been wiped. So we will need to be careful about booting this system up. Again, one of those proceed with caution things. Plug the IDE cable back in. As I said earlier, taking the liberty of upgrading the RAM in this system, because looks like we have our 2 factory modules here, and then someone's thrown in a couple of mixed modules here, and managed to completely break the retention and ejection tabs off of this 3rd slot here. Well, we got way too rambunctious with it, and off they snapped. What is this? A-Pacer, 256 megabytes. So, we see CL2.5, PC2700. I think I'll be able to get this out. 512 megabytes, DDR2700. Elixir branded chips from Lifetime Memory Products. Warranty void if removed. QC tested. Yeah, someone has been playing the cheap and nasty game as concerns this computer's hardware. And given how we've got a white and a black ejection tab on this 1st and 2nd slot, this is probably a dual channel capable system. It would not have been running in dual channel mode with those different memory module sizes. And so we have 256 megabytes here, which means that this other module is probably also a 256 megabyte module. Yep, it is. Samsung, reputable manufacturer. So, and then of course, usually for dual channel mode, you want to install in slots 1 and 3 or 2 and 4, but someone's obviously bumped these to 1 and 2, bumped the factory modules to 1 and 2, and then put the upgrade modules in slots 3 and 4, which is not how you do dual channel mode. And then we have 768. So this would have had about 1,280 megabytes of memory installed. I'm going to put it back the way it was. I'm going to put this back to the way it was just to keep it original, well, reasonably original. I am absolutely going to put a different power. Hell, if that memory module wasn't bad before, it probably is now. I am still absolutely going to put a different power supply in here because I am not powering up this no-name Chinese piece of crap. Because I'm just looking at the cabling. Looking at the cabling alone, this is 16 gauge at best, and I'm seeing 20 and 22 gauge sense wiring, which is cheap. Again, a hallmark of a crappy Chinese piece of junk. So the first thing we're going to do here is I'm breaking out the screwdriver, and this power supply is coming out. And so I don't know if this was just the previous owner of this system being cheap, or I don't know how many owners this system has been through. I don't know how many owners this system has actually been through in its life. So this could just be a long history of people being cheap. Long history of people being cheap. About the most expensive upgrade option I see in here would be the Sony 52X CD burner and DVD-ROM drive. And that's not saying much. Unplug the floppy drive. And, oh yeah, that's a lightweight piece of junk that would blow away in the wind outside. Yeah, look at that. I'm just pressing here and it's bending the top metal of the case out. I imagine if I take this outside and I throw it against the wind's going to make it go the opposite direction, and it's going to be out of the county before I even know it. This thing's a piece of junk. And I imagine I just bent the corner of it by tossing it into the ground like that. Let's see. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, the cabling is the heaviest part of that power supply. They actually blipped off last night a couple of times. Now look at that big mess of cabling. As I said, about the gaudiest thing that I could put in here, but it's going to be the thing that does the trick for now. I will find a more appropriate power supply to put in here. We are set to 110 volts. Last time I checked, this power supply worked, which was last week or thereabouts. And by last week, I actually do mean last week, not last week as in some point in the previous 10 years. Some point between 2 and 15 years ago. There we go. I'll go right down there. This power supply that I'm installing in here right now will actually be going into another system of mine that I hope to be doing a video on soon. That's an auxiliary connector. We don't need that. Now it's time to plug in Molex connectors for the optical drives. This power supply was working whenever I pulled it out of service several months ago because the system to which it was attached was going to be thrown out. So I threw it out into my truck, and it came home with me, and that is not how we plug one of those in. That's how we get a light show out of a floppy drive, as well as copious quantities of smoke. And if we get really lucky, we might even test a smoke detector in the hallway. Oh, they don't make plugging this thing in easy. Okay, that looks reasonably sane enough. I just need to tuck these up out of the way somewhere where they won't interfere with the system fan and make this thing sound like a lawnmower. Plug the hard drive in. There we go. Molex connector there is slightly mangled. Yeah, let's just go ahead and cram a bunch of power wiring right next to an IDE cable. Because this is how you get maximum speed out of your high-performance Ultra ATA 133 hard drive. So, okay. 20 minutes of power supply. 20 minutes of power supply farces and feuding out of the way. Let's go ahead and hook this thing up and power it up, hopefully without quite literally firing it up. So, do I think the system will boot? I'm not sure. Do I think the hard drive has been wiped? Probably. Do I think the hard drive has been wiped? If I had to bet money on it, I would say no, it has not been wiped. Will I be plugging the network in? Absolutely not. In fact, I actually just threw the network cable behind a pile of boxes. Do I think it'll pass post without any major problems? I think so. Do I think the power supply is going to explode whenever I turn it on? Not only do I not believe so, but I really, really, really don't hope so. Because I am going to be severely annoyed if this doesn't work. So, we're going to zoom in on the side here. Camera's off at a distance. And I'm going to stand clear over on the other side of the case. And we're going to have ourselves a bit of a smoke test. And there was silence. And yes, the workbench power supply is actually on. Because I know whenever I put things back together on the Dell Precision 220 system, that I forgot to plug the front panel back into the motherboard, and whenever I hit the power button, absolutely nothing happened. I don't know if you can see in there. We're probably getting obscured by more than a few cables. I'll take the camera off the tripod and show you. We have a little green standby LED all the way over there in that corner of the motherboard, which tells us that our 5-volt standby power is good, and presumably that the chipset has power. We're about to find out if the chipset has power here whenever I turn this thing on. And I will go ahead and reset the tripod, and we will be back in a moment's notice. Okay, I have reset the tripod. I've turned some lights off. I have not yet set up the camera itself. We'll do that once the system's powered up, which I will do in 3, 2, 1. Here we go. Alright. Hit F2, and here we go. BIOS setup utility. Well, all the RAM seems to work, and how about that? I nailed the RAM. I nailed the RAM dead on. 1,280 megabytes. 512K of cache. So I would definitely say very positive. I would definitely say Prescott, quite possibly. Yeah, probably a Prescott chip on the board here. Hyper-threading is obviously enabled. It says the processor speed is 2.60 gigahertz, which isn't quite right. I don't think there should be a C in front of that. I don't think there should be a black bar at the bottom of our monitor here, but there is. I don't know if that's just a monitor out of adjustment or if that's the way the BIOS displays itself. So, let me see. Hyper-threading is on. Language is English. The time is about 3 minutes slow, and the date is correct. Numlock is on. ISA enabled bit. Fan control enabled. Peripheral, serial port, and the parallel port are enabled. I'm gonna leave those as is. Audio, onboard LAN, and ASF support. What is ASF support? Well, it helps generic, so that doesn't tell me anything. Drive configuration. Yeah, I called that one WD800BB. That still may be a Protege drive, just hard disk pre-delay. Yeah, we don't need that. Bus mastering is turned on. Enhanced. So, SATA port 0 and 1 are empty because there's nothing plugged in there. I'm a little bit surprised to see serial ATA ports on the system's motherboard, because I do not remember seeing those on the gateway system that I tore apart. Of course, I may have completely skipped over their presence. So, and then we have primary master, 80 gigabytes, type auto. It detected an 80 conductor cable. UDMA mode 5. Let me see, auto or user. Oh, that's cool. That's quite a bit of configuration on each individual channel. And primary master, okay, everything's set up sanely there. UDMA mode 2, that's the top drive, that's the top optical drive. UDMA mode 2 on the other drive. On the topic of optical drives, do I have a free disk or do I have a bum drive? I don't know. I have my paperclip of optical drive opening encouragement. Okay, nothing in the top. And a Holy Bible disc in the bottom drive. Looks like a commercially pressed CD, King James Version, Old Testament. Okay. So, nothing too exciting. Floppy configuration enabled. Wow, this does support a 2.88 megabyte diskette drive. Okay, that's cool. It also supports 360 and 1.2 meg 5.25 inch drives, so this is a pretty flexible floppy controller if what the BIOS is telling me is correct. Write protection is disabled. I'll turn that on. Event log. We have an event log here? Okay. Something tells me that this is an Intel motherboard, because there are a lot of options here. Yeah, something tells me this is an Intel motherboard, but the BIOS is making the branding completely generic. View event log. Keyboard not functional. Yikes. Lots of keyboard errors. Oh, yikes. Machine check error. System will reset. The 2nd of some month of some year at some or another time. Machine check error. Yeah, that's not good. I don't know if this is just a manufacturing artifact or if this is a result of the processor actually throwing a machine check exception. Either is possible. We have a whole bevy and a half of keyboard errors, I don't mind telling you that much. Maybe they had a cat walking on the keyboard and turning the system on. Or maybe this was a server at some point. Or who knows? Anyways, last event log was September 9th, 2010. So this thing may not have started up in, about 13 and a half odd years. Event log is enabled. I'm going to leave the event log untouched because that... What? I'm tempted to say a few unmentionable words here. Huh? What? Okay, that's extremely strange. Okay, that was really, really, really weird. I've never seen it come up in French before. Video configuration. Primary video adapter. Everything's same there. USB zip emulation type. Floppy or hard disk. We'll leave that as floppy. There's no zip drive in here. Yeah, that's not a zip drive. High speed. Okay, so this does have USB 2 hardware on board. Okay, security. No passwords are set. ACPI. Wake on LAN from S5. Video repost. I'm going to leave that off. Stay off and stay off. So, boot, silent boot, Intel Rapid BIOS boot. Yep, this is an Intel motherboard. Yeah. Yep, that's all the confirmation I need that this is an Intel motherboard. PXE boot to LAN, USB boot is enabled. For some reason the NEC DVD-RW has the highest priority. So I'm going to select the hard disk drives. Okay, removable devices. Okay, display setup prompt, keyboard detection, mouse detection, CD DVD detection, hard drive detection, hard drive self-diagnostic. Okay, so there's a lot of pre-boot, there's a lot of post-functionality on this motherboard. And now I need my mouse pad back because we very well may be about to boot up into an operating system. So yeah, there's a lot of pre-boot testing functionality here. Load and save custom defaults. Okay, that's pretty cool. I'm going to turn the silent boot off. And save changes and exit. And hopefully this thing will not give me cause to have to turn the computer or the camera off immediately. Okay, yep, hard drive has not been wiped. Must be playing around with the port cover on the front. So 1280 megabytes of RAM. It's running Windows XP. Keyboard just initialized. Squeak. That was not this system. That was a different random HP system down here. Seizure warning. Okay, the theming service is turned off. Is the password blank? Okay, the password was blank. Okay, yep, hard drive has definitely not been wiped. And Windows 7 Upgrade Advisor and the mouse is really slow. Revo uninstaller, big icons, big font. Hard drive is just grinding away. We have Norton down in the taskbar, which accounts for about half of the system's performance suddenly disappearing. I would like to have a look at the system event log on Windows, see last time this system actually ran. Given how the password was blank, well, I'm not really sure why the password was blank, but it was prompting for a password. I think someone has done a password. It would not surprise me if somebody has done a password reset on this system in the past. I would say the previous owner was elderly, given how we have big icons and the big anti-aliased fonts. No, you are not going to check for updates. Thank you very little. I have no idea whether this is running in this display panel's native resolution. We have an HP printer driver icon down in the taskbar. I should probably turn the exposure down. Screensavers. There's screensaver. There's no background set, of course. Hard drive activity light is just blinking away. Generic screensaver, for some reason it's been set to wait 8 minutes. I doubt that was deliberate. We are not running in this panel's native resolution. Wait, what graphics adapter did that say? Settings 82865G. Okay, so that would be our North Bridge. Wireless network monitor, okay. Run. Event viewer. System, 1,691 events. System last ran November 28th, 2023. Obviously didn't have a network connection, which is as all things should be. So it ran 11/21/23, ran again 11/28/23, and then it's been dark for a couple months. And then prior to that, it last ran 1/6/2017. It was a clean shutdown. Application pop-up. Application failed to initialize properly. PCA-RMDRV.exe. Obviously some kind of a corrupted driver. The computer has been successfully joined to a work group. Given how this was joined to a work group, and we've got the Windows 7 advisor sitting on the desktop, this was probably migrated over to a Windows 7 box in 2017 and was taken offline. API-PA address. Okay, I'd like to filter the event log. View, filter, event source, disk. Okay. Well, it hasn't thrown up any disk errors yet. So presumably the disk is good so far. Unable to connect. Yeah, that's because you don't have an internet connection. So this mouse is really slow. But at this point we should go ahead and proceed to wiping the hard disk. We've seen it boot. We've seen some of the hardware it has in it. We see that the hard drive is good. Last really did anything in 2017 was probably migrated to a Windows 7 system in 2017 and then shut down. We have a bevy of bloatware down here in the taskbar. Look at our task manager, see if something's happening. Obviously HP update client just crashed. Just a copy of Windows has definitely been through the ringer. And speaking of my computer, let's see what's... minimize that. We have our 2 CD drives, have our 3.5-inch floppy drive, have our 80 gigabyte hard drive. Looks like 2 partitions. If I had to say, .sc, .msc, because that's an MMC snap-in. Only 1 partition. We'll go to local disk C, 2010, 2011, thereabouts. Java console. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, view. Where are the view options? Choose details. Oh, folder options. View. Show hidden files, folders, and drives. Show protected operating system files. And we see that the system volume information folder is dated 9/7/2013. Obviously, we don't appear to be the local system administrator. Control panel. CSNW. Oh, client service for NetWare. Okay. V92. Windows card space. User accounts. And it's blank. That's not a good sign. This should never come up blank. Yeah, something weird's going on. Control panel. Administrative tools. Computer management. Users. Classic. Okay. The administrator account appears to be enabled. We got some weird account here called Classic. See, member of. Okay, so we are a local system administrator. So, but system volume information is dated 9/7/2013. So this is probably not the original copy of Windows that this system shipped with. See if we can get into the system information prompt. Windows XP Professional version 2002, Service Pack 3, 2.6 gigahertz Pentium 4, 1280 megs of RAM, obviously. Advanced settings. Nope, doesn't look like anyone's been playing around in the startup and recovery menu. So we've got about 20 gigabytes in use on our hard drive. So looks like a well-used copy of Windows XP. So at this point we should go ahead and proceed to wiping the hard drive. So I will go ahead and get things ready and set up for that, and we will start that process in a moment. Okay. There we go. See if this does it. D-band 2.3 is starting. Okay. So this is already better than our previous couple of attempts. And you know what, I just realized I haven't even tested to see if the floppy drive works. D-band's automatic hardware identification always takes a good minute. Usually takes a few minutes in all actuality for D-band's automatic hardware identification to complete, with PCI initialization being the longest part of the process, and it does this about 2 or 3 different times. So it's a little bit over aggressive, but it does get the job done, and it's also highly effective at detecting serial ATA or IDE controllers. Of course, all we have in this case is just one hard drive that needs to be wiped. Usually hangs around here for a moment before it finally lets us into the main interface, and we can go ahead and set our wipe up and start it. Of course, if it fails at this point, I'm just going to yank the drive out and stick it in a different system and plug in and either boot D-band off that system, or more likely, there we go, ATA disk, wipe it. Method, DoD short, that's good. Verify last pass, go. Looks like about an hour and a half or thereabouts. So more than likely it's probably going to be about 2 or 3 hours to wipe this disk. But I don't think that'll be too much of a problem. Of course, this is Linux, so we can alt arrow out to another console, and well, the focus just went wacky. There we go. $890 megabytes used. Now, 10 megabytes free or thereabouts. 38 odd megabytes shared. So I imagine that most of that RAM use is just buffers and cache. So, but yeah, we will check back once this wipe has concluded. We are back a number of hours later, and as you can see, D-band here says that all selected disks have been wiped. It took about 2.5 hours, according to the hardware clock, and so we're saying key to continue, just shows us this, and we just do, I'm just going to do an init 6 here. Must be run as PID1. Terminated. And it goes ahead and resets the system. I still have the CD in the drive, so we should boot up off of that. Operating in single channel mode, it says. So yeah, this is definitely a dual channel capable system. Let me see, diagnosis, and looking for something that'll tell me, that'll see HDAT2 version 5.3. Of course, our drive might end up losing the plot. Our optical drive might end up losing the plot here. Let me see. USB upper memory bounds, PCI. Alright, we'll probably get a bunch of prompts. We'll probably get a bunch of prompts here in a moment. Ah, there we go. Okay, there's weird. This is reporting that the drive is in a really weird status. Let me see. Smart not supported. Not supported. Number of sectors is not 0. SCSI EF. What? Let me see. Smart menu. Smart attributes. Okay. Yep, we've got some problems here. We have 2 reallocated sectors. It's been powered on for 5,480 hours. Running at 41 degrees C, two reallocation events, and 1 CRC read error. Test setup not supported. Yep, I'm going to quit messing around with this. And then I'm going to eject CD out of the optical drive. And yep, now it's trying to PXE boot, which isn't going to work because the cable's disconnected. Boot agent FE. So this is a fast Ethernet controller. So this is a fast Ethernet controller, and of course it does support dual channel mode. So what am I going to be doing with this system? Well, I'm going to be finding a good period appropriate power supply to put in this thing. I've got one in storage that I can dig up. And I've also got one in here that I can try, but I can't show on camera because reasons. And I'll probably find a good ATI graphics card of some description with an AGP 8X link on it, and to put in here. Maybe I'll add a sound card in here because I think I've got 1 or 2 that I can rip out of a different system. And I'll make this a pretty decent little Windows XP gaming system. So I'll get the memory situation sorted. Probably get it up to 2 gigs of dual channel, 2 gigs, and get it running up in dual channel mode. But anyways, just reboot. I want to get into the system setup anyways. So yeah, it's all DDR333, but I think the 512 megs. I think the 512 meg stick in channel B slot 0 is what's throwing it down into single channel mode. Imagine that Windows XP would have run pretty decently had I gone ahead and just stuck the factory modules in slots 1 and 3 to go ahead and bring it up into dual channel mode. So I'm going to turn silent boot back on, save and exit. So, but yeah, It's not going to boot off anything because I've wiped the drive now. So, anyways, I think that'll do it for this video. So, this is TCG Productions here. Peace out, guys. Peace out, and I will see y'all in the next one. So, whoa, hello. Put that in the blooper reel.